Hello everyone. Welcome to Garden Chat number 11. We will now get our guests in. I see people are joining. Thank you. I hope the connection is going to work. Rauf, it seems like you are there.
Yes. Can you see me this time?
Yeah. I cannot see you, but I hope our viewers can see you, and that's the most important. All right. So hello, everyone. Let us know in the comments if you can hear and see us well. This is Garden Chat number 11. My name is Emmanuel Xachatryan. I volunteer for Bright Garden Voices, and I welcome you to this Garden Chat. As always, we don't represent any government or organization. The opinions that you will hear today from me or from our guest, Rauf, only are our own, and these are our thoughts and opinions, and they don't represent anybody else. Before I introduce our guest, I must remind everyone that we are witnessing a forced and tragic exodus of tens of thousands of Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh today. These people have been traumatized both physically and emotionally, and therefore I call upon everyone to help the displaced Armenians with everything you can. And above all, we need to be compassionate. We need to show care and understanding, and that's why we decided to invite Rauf today for the Garden Chat. When it comes to this conflict, we don't often hear the words of compassion on social media, but Rauf has been a notable exception. Rauf, before we talk more about what happened on Twitter /X recently, please introduce yourself to help people who are watching us now or will be watching us in the recording afterwards to form an idea of who our guest today is.
Yeah, there's a little bit of delay when you come through, but hopefully that resolves itself as we go. So to introduce myself to people, I have recently burst out of obscurity. I'm a lawyer in Canada. I was born and raised in Azerbaijan. My family is from Karabakh. My mother's father's side are all from Lachin, and they are Lachin Kurds, which, you know, well, I'll get more into it, but as a child, I thought Kurd was kind of a character trait. I didn't realize it was an ethnicity until afterwards. So my mom's dad's side are Kurds. My mom's side are from Sheki, which is a city towards the north, closer to Georgia. And my dad's family is from a village in the district of Terter. It's just across, if you go to the map, it's just across Mardakert, which Azerbaijanis have referred to in the recent years as Agdere. It's you know, if you look at the map, it's Mardakert, and there's a field, and then across the field is my dad's village, and you know, that field was a minefield, so you couldn't really go, or if you showed up there, it was really dangerous. You could be shot, and it was a place where the infamous line of contact passed, and you could literally see Armenians on the other side with the naked eye. So it was a very dangerous place, and since my dad was from there, I often visited, but it was not a pleasant place to visit. It was always dangerous. It was always kind of a scene of fighting whenever any kind of break of ceasefire happened. It was always kind of ground zero. So I myself was born in Baku. And this is because my family, so my parents had me after they moved to Baku. They were all, so even though my mom's dad's side are from Lachin, and most of her relatives were there, my mom herself and her family lived in Tartar in the region center. It was a little bit more removed from the line of contact, but not removed enough that you didn't need to be aware of it. So it was, they moved to Baku, they had me, I was born in 1988, and that's when all the troubles were starting, and around the time that I was aware of my own existence, things had gotten really bad, and there became kind of waves of deaths in our family. My grandpa died from my dad's side, and then my uncle, who was 18 years old, died in the war. And so there was nobody to, so everybody went back to sort of take care of the family, arrange for funerals and all of that. So there was nobody else left physically in Baku to take care of me. So I was transported from the safety of Baku right into the war zone. So that's my kind of initial experience in the Karabakh War. And since then, I grew up in Azerbaijan. I went to school. Then I was involved in music. Then I went to med school, and 3 years of med school, some events happened that are unrelated to any of this, that made me decide to leave, and I came to Canada, and I've been living in Canada ever since. And here I've gone to school. I have studied political science, then I studied law, and now I'm a prosecutor. So that's my background. Sorry if it was too long, but
that's a good intro. Thank you. Thank you, Rauf. So let's bring to our audience a little closer what happened recently. A thread of yours recently went viral within the Caucasus Twitter, or now it's called X. And there you shared your experiences and opinions on the ongoing situation as a refugee from Lachin. Is this, by the way, the wording that you are comfortable with if I use refugee from Lachin? Do you feel that this represents?
Yeah, so I would say the wording captures it in a way that I was displaced, because all of these places, were my family's places. This is where they existed for decades and centuries, and these places were places that I grew up deprived of. So even though I was not myself born there, and I wasn't necessarily running for my life while this was happening, I am a refugee in a way that I was born to people who were displaced and were deprived of their homes. So I still think of myself as a refugee and a person who was displaced, but I myself don't have the experience of literally running for my life while we're surrounded and kind of at a gunpoint. It wasn't like that.
I see your point. All right. For those unaware of your viral thread, could you please introduce our viewers to some of its content? It was a very personal story, actually, and it was a kind of personal take on the experience of today's IDPs, and I think our audience should hear that. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the experience that you had as a child growing up. During the first, the aftermath of that first Nagorno-Karabakh war, and what it meant for your family.
Yeah, so the tweet was to relate my experiences and to paint a picture of how horrible all of this was and how traumatic it was to have lived through that. And I didn't see, so, and this ties into maybe another question, but I just didn't see anybody really getting it. Like, I didn't see anybody um, I've seen a lot of kind of coexistence types of messages where people just want to get along, they want to live with each other. But when it comes down to it, it doesn't really, there's not a lot of self-reflection, there's not a lot of self-criticism, and it's really the easiest thing in the world to say, oh, let's just get along and live with each other. But the problem is, how do you do that? How do you move forward? How do you reach out? So I thought, I'm going to relate this experience and I'm going to paint a picture of how horrible this was and why, because it's horrible, we need to stop doing that. We need to stop. And to stop doing that, we need to, it's kind of the easiest and the hardest thing in the world is to turn a mirror. You know, you have to look inside and you have to kind of stop blaming others for the conflict, and you have to look within yourself and see what is it about me that makes me predisposed to conflict and makes me kind of, what am I doing to further this conflict? And I don't think that a lot of people are asking themselves that question. So so the picture I painted is very real. One of my first memories is walking down my dad's village, which is the village across from Martakert. And you know, walking down this village, I remember it was nighttime, and there was a dirt road, and I'm walking down, and suddenly there's bullets flying all over my head, and to this day I haven't really dared look up what they were, but I remember they lit up. So you know, it was. And it was really kind of, it was quite the sight. You know, it was nighttime, and suddenly it was like daytime, and there were all these bullets flying. And I remember, you know, like horrible explosions. I remember, you know, once my mom was feeding me as a kid, and you know, and a bomb or a shelling or whatever it was, something exploded nearby, and I choked on my food, and she was feeding me. From fear. I was a little child, and you know, I remember. So my dad's village was actually occupied at some point by Armenian forces and then taken back. So I remember after it was back in Azerbaijani hands, going back to it, and everything was destroyed. It was like someone was angry at trees, the house, the gates, like everything was mangled. You know, we had these big gates, big metal gates called darvaza in Azerbaijan. They're very typical of the area. It's like parallel door, kind of big gates that open outwards. And there's usually a little door for foot traffic, and so that big metal thing that looked so huge to me as a kid looked like somebody had chewed it up. It looked like a giant monster had come and chewed up this darvaza, this metal gate, and it was just a mangled piece of metal. And the house was completely covered in bullets and shelling. There was, I remember my child's memory. It's very vivid. You know, I remember seeing this peach on a peach tree, and it was perfectly cut in half. It was like a laser had cut it in half. It was these kind of horrible sights of death and destruction and complete devastation. You know, nothing was left. And you know, that was the kind of place where people had to continue living, and there was you know, there was no water anymore because the Tartar River in the summer it would be blocked. So and the village had you know, a canal that brought water from Tartar River, and that canal was no more. So people had no water, and as a kid, I hated visiting that place, kind of more because there was no water than because of the war. You know, it was just really hot, and nothing to kind of splash your face with. It was just a really difficult existence, and my and the village was next to a minefield, where if you went from our house, which is my dad's parents' house, you went a little down the road, there was my great uncle's house, and his house on one of the sides of it was lined with tall trees, and once you got kind of once you walked across the tree line, you saw this kind of huge field, kind of barren field. There was nothing there. And as kids, we were told to not even go near it. And of course, we snuck out and went and did it anyway. And you could see, if you, stepped on the wrong thing, you could be blown up. And in fact, that's essentially what happened to my uncle. He stepped on a landmine. And not only did he, so having stepped on a landmine, he actually lost his legs. And then after losing his legs, he immediately shot himself in the head because he didn't want to live like that until for the rest of his life. And both my grandparents died during the war, and my mom's side's house was subject to shelling, and the kitchen had split. This kitchen was this kind of like an adjacent to the house. It was kind of like an appendix, and it had broken away from the house. It was everybody had rushed out, kind of having taken all of their possessions and basically a truck, and in the process, so that side of the family, they took all of their stuff in a truck, and so the Armenian side was shooting at the bridge that connects Tartar to the rest of Azerbaijan over the Tartar River. So they had to go on the riverbed, and on the riverbed, all the furniture inside was broken, and eventually they moved it all to Shaki, and then we just never got it back because we were too poor, and nobody had either the resources or even we couldn't even find a person to make that huge move to move all of the furniture back from there once we had the house back, and it was just devastation. We had a barn, and that was my grandma's, so my maternal side. We had a barn where animals used to be kept, and in that barn we now had refugee families. So one of those families, both of those families were from Karabakh. One was an old couple. It was a man and a woman that my grandparents took in literally from the street. They found them outside of our same kind of metal gate, outside the metal gate, kind of wandering around, and they just took them in and gave them a room in our barn. And the other one was a young family, man and wife and 2 kids. And they lived in these barn rooms, and the walls were lined, I remember, with newspapers, just to create some kind of feeling of home, and to forget that it was a barn. Constant, slept to the sounds of gunfights, and I remember dogs barking and bullets flying. Like that's how I slept. And so these places so eventually I was taken back to Baku, but these places I visited every summer. So every summer I was there and I witnessed what was happening, and the summertime was the time when the river would be blocked, so we wouldn't have any water. So a lot of problems with water. Less so in where my mom's family was, and very critically where my dad's side lived. So that was my childhood. I grew up with all this trauma, and I couldn't understand why. What was it about me that I deserved this? Like, what? Why couldn't I? I heard all these stories. Everyone longed for the past. And they instill this longing and trauma in you, just through these stories. So it's like Lachin, like it loomed large in everybody's mind. I always thought, why can't I go and my grandparents, great grandparents' graves and their houses. Why can't I go to these places? Why my mom's family always visited Shusha or Tushsu in the summers and just stayed there. And honestly, it sounded like great fun. It sounded like the best thing in the world. And I just felt like I was, dealt a bad hand. Why couldn't I go? And and then simultaneously you would see all these places completely destroyed on TV, and you would see all this tragedy happening to other people. And in a similar way, I saw the Morov Mountains. The people who don't know, the Morov Mountains are, it's this very beautiful mountain in North Karabakh. You can see very clearly from my dad's village. So this was my childhood. It was, completely tragic and kind of oddly beautiful at the same time, because Karabakh is so beautiful. And I just thought, I don't want any other person in the world to ever go through what I saw as a kid. I don't think that's a good childhood for anybody. And I just found myself in a place where nobody else was saying anything. Or nobody that I knew kind of was saying it. Either was not saying anything, or even if they were saying something, it was kind of not. It didn't go the whole way. And so I decided to write something, and I thought that I didn't have many followers. I thought maybe 20 people will see it. Some of my handful of followers. It was mostly friends and colleagues and acquaintances. I didn't have a big following, and suddenly it kind of became. Suddenly, I kept getting Twitter notifications, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Where, what have I gotten myself into? And so that's what happened.
Right. Well, thank you, Rauf. Thank you for sharing more details. And for those who haven't seen the Twitter thread that you posted, you share these personal stories there. Or kind of, as you said, there was probably there wasn't too much self-reflection around you, but then you decided to self-reflect and relate to the experiences of people today, and then you concluded with interesting takes on this. We will talk about them a little bit more, but I was wondering, was there any particular trigger for you personally that made you post that? Anything you've seen online, or maybe a comment that you read, or this is generally just something that you live with, and seeing overall the situation with fleeing Armenians made you remember and relate in this way?
Yes, it was. The trigger was, well, first of all, I've lived with this trauma for all of my life. I was completely distraught when the war happened in 2020, and again, I just did. Whenever these kind of wars restart, I find myself kind of, everybody goes into pack mentality. Azeris kind of group with Azeris, Armenians group with Armenians, and I don't know where to fit with my compassion for the other side. So I just sort of get left in the middle, and that's a really lonely and really frustrating place to be, because you feel like it's just you, and there's nobody else. So there was that element of loneliness that I really wish that somebody could relate to this, and I really wish that I heard someone else say these things that I want to tell the world. And it was partially that, and it was partially just the trauma trigger of seeing people leave their homes to never see them again, and that has loomed really large in my life and in my family's life. I know what tragedy that is. There's really I don't know. I remember when I was learning about the ancient Greeks. I remember how they used ostracization, sending people away as kind of one of the worst punishments you could have. It was kind of considered worse than death. I've lived that. I know that kind of there's no greater tragedy in life than that. It's so at least for me. And I thought, wow, like what are we doing? Is anybody thinking about this? Is anybody really reflecting that this is really horrible? That I was thinking of my own people. We've kind of in the 90s, at least Azerbaijanis of Karabakh went through this. And how can you endorse the same type of stuff? How can you, as people who were subjected to that, and then come around and say that wasn't okay what you did to us, but as punishment we're going to do it to you? It just didn't make any sense to me, and I didn't see that. Maybe people. I mean, it's quite possible that people were saying it. I just wasn't seeing it, but I just felt like kind of screaming into the void, and that's what I was animated by. It was so I came out of my lurking and posted something.
Yeah, it's true that this sort of you did this first always happens in these conversations around this conflict, and nobody actually, well, very infrequently, people actually take the stance to say that we need to stop this, and instead of pointing fingers, we need to show some compassion. So thank you for showing that compassion in that Twitter thread. But considering the environment in which we currently deal with this conflict as our communities, what were the reactions? And the reactions that you got to your Twitter thread, and did you find them surprising or encouraging? How did you feel about that?
I was surprised by the almost universal warm reception by Armenians. I thought that they would get defensive because I was, the whole first part of that thread is about, the tragedies that I went through at the hands of, Armenian forces, and I thought they would want to minimize that or, try to justify it somehow. And to my surprise, I actually did not find that. People were, really empathetic and kind. And to be honest with you, I always thought of myself as somebody who self-reflects and, has some insight into these things. But even me, I wasn't really in communication with Armenians before. A lot of this reflection was sort of just me thinking about things that I've gone through, and Armenians were kind of like somewhere out there, and so this was a really fascinating experience for me to kind of reach out my hand and have that be held back. That was really beautiful. I was shocked by the behavior of my own people, but not surprised. What I mean by that is it was shocking because I was sharing something so deeply personal and traumatic, and something that has been the kind of center of Azerbaijani grievances for the last 3 decades, and that's not what they focused on. They focused on my, taking responsibility for our own wrongdoings, and it became sort of kind of name calling, you traitor, and how can you? There were so many conspiracy theories about who I really am. There was people thought, some of my favorites were, somebody said that I'm an Armenian account who suddenly decided to, switch and pretend to be an Azerbaijani online. The leading theory was that I'm trying to get, either refugee status or a permanent residence in Canada, and that this is why I'm saying these things. I found that really bizarre, because obviously these people don't know that you don't get immigration status in foreign countries for being friendly to Armenians. That's not how it works. Related to that was accusations that I'm being paid by the Armenians, which is really interesting, because you would think that if they paid me, I would produce something better than a Twitter thread. It was just kind of all kinds of moronic accusations, and there were people who were pointing to the rainbow flag in my profile. Oh, he's gay. So obviously, he hangs out with the worst of the worst people. That was, again, not surprising. And then there were people who were just kind of horrible. People who were swearing, using the worst kind of words towards me. I just found that so shocking, that that is the level of enmity. These people are just out for blood. They don't it seems like their hate is so strong that it will consume people on their side. It doesn't really matter. Whoever is in their way, the hate is all consuming. So I found that so disappointing, and I was surprised by the Turks' comments. I never thought that Turks are really in this conflict. They are now militarily, because they've basically fought the war for us and won for us. I thought, where is all this emotional reaction from the Turks coming from? And I was really surprised by how, just kind of right-wing ideology can become, so vivid, directed against a person who has survived trauma. And the last surprising thing was how much the Kurdish thing got its own life. I never thought of myself as Kurdish, because my family were assimilated Kurds. They didn't speak Kurdish. The only Kurdish thing about them was that they just said, we are Kurds. So for that reason, I never really described myself as Kurdish. But the very mention, kind of the passing mention, that my mom's family is from Lachin became, Kurds from Lachin became, oh, you're Kurdish. This explains everything. This explains why you're a giant traitor. That was surprising. I hadn't heard this kind of anti-Kurdish discourse in Azerbaijan, but it doesn't surprise me. Azerbaijan kind of frames itself as this multi-ethnic, tolerant place. It's the furthest thing away from that. It's just completely not true.
Right. So, yeah, it's clear that when hatred takes over everything, it really makes people blind, and then driven by that hatred, they almost take everything that they can, the rainbow flag, you being Kurd, and all kind of conspiracies, just to make the point that proves your point, that there is basically too much hatred, and how are these people going to live together? Which was basically the conclusion of your Twitter thread, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating that these people attacking you in that way don't really realize that they are actually helping you prove the point that you made originally.
Yes, I think that they're, maybe not, I don't want to say they're not smart enough to see the irony. Maybe they're just the hate is so all-consuming that, it doesn't leave any room for self-reflection and seeing the irony in things. So, a lot of those people that were reacting that way were just kind of proving the opposite of what the official line is, that, oh, we just want coexistence, and we just want we are such a multi-diverse place. You know, why wouldn't you want to live with us? And they were proving the absolute opposite. And I don't think that they either don't realize it or maybe they don't care, which is more depressing. I hope it's the case that they just don't realize it. They will at some point.
You know, we've hosted internally displaced people in some of our meetings before, and it's almost surprising that often some of the people who have been affected by this conflict the most, they tend to be the most empathetic and compassionate. What is your opinion on this? What might be driving this?
Yeah, because, you know, the conflict for us wasn't just theoretical. It was, you know, happening to us. It was happening in our lives. It was, it was not a soccer match, you know, to watch on TV. And for a lot of people who are not part of the conflict, it's really kind of akin to a sporting event. You know, our side scored, your side scored. You know, they don't, if you don't have a personal stake in it, if it's not your family being bombed and your family dying, then it's really easy to support war. You know, it's easy to, and people sometimes say, you know, oh, like you might be more liberal or more understanding because you live in the West. Actually, what I've discovered is people are worse than the West. You know, Azerbaijanis that I know who live in the West are usually much more nationalistic than, you know, a lot of other Azerbaijanis I know. And I think it's because, you know, it's just so easy to come and live in the comfort and freedoms of the West and then cheer for a war back home, like a sporting event. Yeah, it's I think it's outrageous. I think it's horrible. It should be shameful. But yeah, I agree with you that people, you know, it doesn't surprise me. People who have gone through war and especially people who have seen what coexistence is. You know, like I was. For example, somebody said, "Oh, you're using the word mardakert, so you didn't say Aldara." So that's, you know, it shows that you're very pro-Armenian. And it's like, well, if you lived in that place, you would know, literally no Karabakh Azerbaijani I knew referred to that place as Aldara. You know, it's just kind of a new word with to you know, comply with the nationalist line. You know, I was once talking to my uncle who's from Aghdam, which I think I mentioned in my thread, and when I told him, you know, what's Aghdara really like, and he told me, "You mean Mardakert?" You know, it's like it was stuff like this. You know, it's like if you grew up there, you realize Armenians were very much a part of everyone's life. There was a doctor in Tartar, you know, which was majority Azerbaijani, and I don't remember his name. I really wish I remembered his name. It sounded something similar to Shalmian. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was so beloved that people would cross the line of contact well into the war to go visit this doctor. And an Azerbaijani family was so grateful to him for you know, healing their child that they named their child Shalmian, or, you know, whatever his actual last name was, and he had to tell them that's actually my last name, not my first name. You know, they just love this doctor so much that they named their kids after him, you know, as he was known. So these were the relations between us. And, you know, my grandma always said, you know, and she would shake her head and she would say, "I don't understand. Like, I never saw a single bad thing from Armenians." You know, it was, you know, if you're from there, you grow up with these stories, and, you know, yes, you see some of the prejudices, but you also see how complex the situation is, and it's not so easy. You know, it's not black and white. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
I see. I see some of the questions in the comments are echoing some of the things that I was going to ask you anyway. So I'm just going to continue with my planned questions.
Yeah.
I need to read this out to you and to everyone who is following us. In your tweet, you posed the question, how could anyone seriously believe Armenians could be integrated into Azerbaijan? And then you followed that up by describing how for years Armenians have been painted as enemies and ultimate villains behind any failure in Azerbaijan. You also mentioned that Armenian history has been erased and Albanized, which is, to be honest, not something we hear often from the Azerbaijani side. Do you think we can say that these are the main factors behind that hatred that you've seen yourself now among Azerbaijanis, but as well back in 2020 when the war started, was that hatred fueling that war? And how come you managed to escape that? You already said that maybe it's not the fact that you live abroad. Maybe it's not the fact that you experienced a democratic state yourself. But what is it then? What do you think?
I think those things did play a role in the way that I had access to information that wasn't available to me in Azerbaijan. So in Azerbaijan, even if you are, the most liberal person, you just may not have, the books in the library to take out and read about, what really happened and, what really is the history of the place. So I had access, but I think what really made a difference for me was probably therapy. I was in therapy for like 8 years, and I really reflected a lot on who I am as a person, what parts of me are really originally me, and what parts were just instilled in me by propaganda or by my parents, stuff like that. And once you get that ball rolling, once you start reflecting and really questioning yourself and questioning the world, I think it's really hard to stop that process. And yes, I hated Armenians. Yes, I grew up with that hatred because to me, they were kind of the authors of my misfortunes, and that's what I saw on TV. That's what I read in the books, that these are villains. They, killed your people. Look, we would see horrible images of Khojale that stuff shouldn't be shown to children in the first place. And I find that appalling in retrospect, that we were shown like, reporters kind of picking out dead, stiff children, with their, dead little kind of dull looking faces from the field. And that stuff really gets to you. It's like look what was done to us. And we Azerbaijanis of Karabakh, they, like, I knew them personally. I knew that these are people who are, they're not ideological. They might have some kind of prejudices, but nobody kind of sat at the dinner table and talked about Armenians are bad. It's people just cared about, when is my daughter going to get married? When is my son going to get married? Where are we going to hold the wedding? Like, kind of, these are the things that people were concerned with. It was not ideology, and the ideology comes from the state. And basically almost everything I was taught in history was completely fake. It was the people that could be objective. There's this very famous video of Ilham Aliyev sitting in a room with a bunch of historians who were writing in the encyclopedia for Azerbaijan, and he just extremely rudely throws one of the people there, one of the writers, out of the room because he had not talked enough about Heydar Aliyev in his book. So these are the people writing the history. Everything has to align with the top. Everything is top down. The propaganda is endless. It's like hard to even understand where it starts and begins. So yeah, it's all fake history. I was taught Karabakh was always Azerbaijani. Armenians came there in the 19th century, after Turkmenchai, after the Iran-Russia war, and, the Tsar really wanted to Christianize the place and have a loyal population, so Armenians were just kind of brought in from Iran, and they just made the place their own. And then, look, we were so generous to them. We hosted them in our land, and then they got, they were ungrateful to us, and now they want to separate. What injustice? We have to put an end to it. That was the line, and you had no reason to not believe it. It just was everywhere, and it took some honest self-reflection, and it took me a while, and it was not made better because Armenians didn't help this. The fact that these 7 regions of around Karabakh were held in ruin, and people were not allowed to go back there, and whenever you went online you got called horrible names like Azerbaijan, and you're all stupid and you have no culture, you have no history, stuff like this, and then you thought, well, yeah, like maybe they are the villains, and that's such an easy position to take. It's so easy to just decide to hate the other side because everybody else on your side does, so why not? Nobody wants to stand out, and I guess I've just never been that person to make my life easy.
Somebody was asking in the comment section, how do you think we can engage with the Armenian population in the US if they don't want to talk to us, even if we have good intentions? That's an interesting question. So,
yeah, well, if they don't want to talk, they don't want to talk. I don't know what can be done, but I found in my experience there are many different types of people. There are people who will not talk to you. Like when the 2020 war was happening, I actually knew a guy in Canada from Karabakh, and I had talked to them, and we were very friendly. And when the war happened, he just stopped talking to me, and I reached out to him and I said, I'm so sorry for what's happening. It's horrible. And he just sort of sent me like all the laundry list of grievances that, it's like, oh, your people are doing this and your people are doing that. And I was like, well, like it's not me, like I'm trying to come to you, with warmth, but you also have to understand that when people are going through a really traumatic time, maybe it's not the best time for dialogue, and maybe it's not the best time for hugs and kisses, and they're watching their people go through horrible trauma, and there are some distinct amazing people who are able to in that moment also extend to you, but there are people who are just dealing with trauma and they just want to be left alone, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think but they might be not open to a dialogue with you right now, but they might be in the future.
Right. Thank you for sharing your opinion. And I would also add that if you are an individual and not an organization, and you are looking to connect with the other side, consider joining Bright Garden Voices as a volunteer, as many of us have done. And we are having an open and respectful dialogue on a continuous basis. And that's on personal level, I can say that it helps to fight against the dehumanization of the other side, I think, on both sides, and that's quite important. Rauf, you mentioned therapy, that as a potentially the main reason why you kind of made that transition from vilifying Armenians in your mind towards perceiving them as humans. Do you think that if you stayed in Azerbaijan, continuing being influenced with the media and everything, but you still went through therapy, would that have the same effect on you? Or the media is just so overwhelming, and the government policy is just so overwhelming that even if you are the type of self-reflecting person, you still have no chance to, or of course, individuals might have. But what's your take on that?
Actually, I think I'm optimistic on this because I know for a fact, I know so many people in Azerbaijan who just don't hate Armenians. No matter what propaganda is telling them, they just do not hate Armenians. And I remember when the Eurovision entry for Armenia would come, and there were two songs in particular that were really popular. The first one was Sirusho, and she, and this was during my med school years, and basically every man on campus was in love with her, and was just kind of smitten, and was kind of really curious, and wanted to learn more, wanted to vote. And then there was that the Norpar, the very kind of similar to Azerbaijani music sounding number that people were, people just love the stuff, and you can't, our cultures are so similar. We have the same kind of rhythm in our music. It just sounds kind of, it sounds like yours. And once you hear that, kind of the hate starts to melt away. You're just kind of, so therapy is not necessarily the only way, and I wasn't in therapy just because of this stuff. I have some, other traumas in my life that I had to deal with. So I think that even if you are in Azerbaijan, we live in an information age. It's not like my childhood where, internet was not really that big of a thing, and now it is. So you can go, you can look, you can learn real history. You can look at these ancient churches in Artsakh. You can look at all the churches in Azerbaijan that were destroyed, or they were made to be Albanian. It's all of it is out there. It's just, it really takes a curious person, and I do think that there's a lot of people who are totally brainwashed, and maybe some of them are beyond help. But I think most humans are just human. They don't necessarily want to hate. But they don't want to deal with that. People want to move on. People want to coexist. And even myself, the first time, actually, contacts are really helpful for this. The first time I saw an Armenian in my life was when I was in Georgia, and I was there for a jazz festival, and I was singing, and after we went up to the stage and we came down, there was a really lovely, friendly group of people who came up to us, and in Russian said, you guys were great, and we really loved you. And I asked them, where are you from? Where are you from? And they said, Armenia. And I thought, oh my God, what, why aren't you murdering me? Like, what, you look like wonderful people. You're smiling at me. You loved my music. That's really crazy, and suddenly all of this hate is washing away, and you realize it was just kind of based on prejudices and propaganda, and it is so kind of easily ignored by human contact. And so I'm hopeful, even for people who are in Azerbaijan.
Great. So this goes to prove that my personal opinion is also that grassroots movements and human-to-human contact, that is the only thing that gives me hope that this situation can be resolved, because I have zero faith in politicians and what they're planning to do with our communities. Lachin, to which you have a very special connection for obvious reasons. In a way, this is your ancestral land, right? And it's been in the spotlight for the last 9 months at least. How did you feel about that? Did it hit you in any particular way?
I thought, well, it kept being referred to as a corridor, and I thought, well, here we go again with kind of ignoring the people who live there. It's like just being talked about as a corridor, and I was like, well, there's people who are from Lachin, like should we not address them? And so there was a part of me that was, kind of irritated that this place that I'm from is just being discussed without acknowledging my presence in the world. But also there was but that kind of cuts both ways. And it's like, Lachin Corridor, for example, like, they're not asking anybody who actually lives in Lachin if they're okay with Armenians passing through. It's like, I bet if you ask people, they wouldn't care. That Armenians come and go. And so yeah, it was an odd experience to see your hometown kind of in the news. But since I've never been to that place, it's only ever been a theoretical home for me. So I've been really curious. I've looked at its pictures, and I've wondered, I wonder what it looks like. I wonder what the nature is like. I've heard wonderful things. But with respect to, would I go there? I honestly don't think so. I thought that, once these territories were back in, first of all, I never believed that they would be taken back, but once that they were taken back, I thought, this is not how I imagined it. I imagined all of this happening through democratic means. I imagined, I always hoped that, Karabakh should be, either independent or, have some kind of special status, but with its Azerbaijani population, taking part, and maybe Shusha could have its own little special status. And I always imagined kind of things being restored, but what's happening right now is just conquest, and conquest comes with other people's ideas for the place, and I can't relate. Those people, the places that are being built now, I can't relate to them because I don't know it. That's not the places from my memory. So I don't. And there's also this moral dilemma. I don't want to go to a place that was ethnically cleansed from its population. I don't want to go to a Shusha or go to Stepanakert or any of these places and just be at a crime scene. It's like, it's a crime scene. People were uprooted from this place, and what does it say about me if I'm enjoying my life there, taking pictures, smiling? I find that just personally for me, that moral dilemma is inescapable. Maybe some people think otherwise, but notwithstanding that I've longed for for these places all my life, morally, I feel like I don't really have a choice but to not go there.
I see your point. We have only a couple of minutes left, and I have one last question for you. Considering that you wouldn't want to go back or even visit, considering the modern history of this territory, and the fact that as you mentioned, it's been ethnically cleansed in recent days, and also considering all the trauma that your own family experienced, despite the beautiful memories, what do you think the future of Karabakh is? If everybody thinks like you, or if everybody thinks like what the media wants media in Azerbaijan wants people to think like, what do you think is going to happen to this land?
If people thought like me, or if people thought like the media wants them to think?
Let's think about both scenarios.
If people thought like me, I think that things would probably be better, because people want others to affirm their pain. People want to be seen. People want to be, they don't want to be gaslit. They don't want to be told, "Oh, your tragedy didn't happen," and haha, let's laugh at it. Who would be who would like that? So I think once these things, once you are, if you stop asking, "Oh, you apologize first," and then I will apologize. Once that stops, once you say, you know what, I actually have no control over you apologizing for anything, but I have control over myself, that I can apologize for things that are objectively wrong. You'd be surprised how people actually come to you when they are also sorry. And that's what I found through my experience in the last few days, that once you acknowledge their pain, it kind of disarms them, so there's nothing to attack you with, they just come and say, you know what, I'm sorry too. And I did this, and my people did this, and suddenly you realize, okay, well, what were we fighting about? And you sort of see a future. But with what's happening right now, there's a lot of kind of talk about how the conflict is over or whatever, and that's all a lie. It's not over. If anything, it's just beginning. I, I lived in sort of exile for 30 years, never going to these lands. Did I stop thinking about it? No. I never thought, it's something that you take with you for the rest of your life. You don't stop thinking about it, and you always want to go back to a place that is the place of your ancestors. So, Armenians that are being uprooted from there, they're not going to stop thinking about this. And, but the minute there's some kind of regime shaking in Azerbaijan, kind of some kind of democratic movement that makes the state a little less powerful, is the most opportune moment to, go back and take what's ours from the Armenian side. So then you have another war. And that's just going to continue forever, unfortunately. Yeah, it's a cycle.
Yeah.
And if we don't, yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
I see that point. Well, thank you very much, Rauf. This is the end of our garden chat. Thank you for sharing your story and with me and with our audience, but also above all, thank you for showing that compassion and understanding through your own lens, through your own experience, that compassion and understanding for Armenians who are fleeing for their life today. And thank you everyone who watched this garden chat or who will watch it in recording. Don't forget that empathy has healing powers, and be kind to people who are suffering today. That's the most important thing. Thank you very much, and see you at the next garden chat.
Amazing.